Okay, I have here an Acorn Electron keyboard. Obviously I've unscrewed the base and the PCB and taken the ribbon cable off and just have the keyboard part, because one of the keys is sticky, and it's the A key. So I've already had this apart and cleaned it and fixed a lot of the keys on here, and I didn't fix the A key on the first run through because it was still sort of working and still a bit sticky. And quite often with these old keyboards, even when they're quite corroded, if you hit them, I don't know, 50, 100 times, they start to loosen up. They haven't been used in 30 odd years, and there's a bit of corrosion on the leaf contact inside the key actuators. So sometimes if you can get something out of them, just hitting them quite a few times frees them up. But this keyboard here is worse than most, and I had to fix a lot of the keys on here. And now that they're all fixed, the A key is still a little bit sticky, and just repeatedly hitting it isn't clearing that. So I'm going to take it apart and fix it as well. The other aspect of that key is that ordinarily it's one of the keys that's underneath. You can see it. It's underneath the protective foam pad that sits on here normally, which obviously protects the ribbon from shorting the keyboard, but I'm going to replace that anyway. I've taken that off and cleaned it all, which means I can get at the A key now. So I'm going to show you how to take the key out and fix it. But first of all, I'm going to pull the key out to start with. I'm going to leave the keyboard chassis is all in here and it's all screwed in. Ordinarily you take that out and you just work with that, but it's just one key, so I'm going to do it without removing it from the whole case, unless I really need to. Let's see, let's take the key out to start with. For starters, there we go. And so there's the actuator inside there. One way you can test these keys for continuity is by using a probe on, there's two little holes just either side of the key, the white plastic key shaft. I don't know if you can see that, either side there. So when you have all the keys off and you've taken the keyboard chassis out, you can test them for continuity. And if we do that on this one, yeah, we're not actually getting anything. To be honest, that's not a very accurate way of measuring it. When these keys were new, it was probably fine, but when they're a little bit corroded, the ends of the pins that you're actually putting the probes against are probably corroded as well, so it's not necessarily a good indication. Better way of testing it is to use the actual contacts on the back of the keyboard. So I might just try that. It's kind of tricky to do. You've got to do old chopsticks with the probes. Let's see. I'm going to hold it down and see if we get some continuity across it. Yeah. There's no continuity there. So it's another good reason to get it out of there. Okay, so I am going to desolder it. I'm just going to make sure that I've got the right key. It's that one, definitely that one. Just to be sure, I'm just going to mark it. Okay, I've got my iron on. heating up a little bit. I'm just going to open the window a little bit. There we go. Put the fan on. Let's get this thing out and then we'll have a look at it a bit more closely. Plenty of heat. Solder sucker ready. Pop this off. Oh, that's good. This one. Probably enough. Turn the iron off. And now I'm going to get some pliers to pop this actuator out of the keyboard. I'm just going to put some pressure against these pins. It's really important not to move sideways or damage the traces around these keys. So you just want to put a flat, hard surface against the pin and push, and that pops the remaining solder that's on the actuator, and then you should be able to pull the actuator out of the chassis. There we go. And here it is. So that's what we're looking at. We're going to take this apart and clean it, because I am almost certain that inside here are two little leaf contacts that are probably green with corrosion, two little copper contacts that aren't making contact anymore. The other thing we can do is we can test the continuity again on these pins now that they're exposed. So let's just have a quick look, see what we've got. Nothing. Nothing. Alright, let's see if we can change that. Just turn the fan off. There you go. Right, now to get in to these little actuators, we're actually going to have to break this casing apart. You've got, let's see if I can show this. I'm going to need to get a different screwdriver as well. Let's just get the screwdriver and I'll show you what I'm doing. So yeah, we've got a black plastic barrel and a white casing on the end, and we've got these three clips. Now these two clips on the sides actually clip the whole thing to the keyboard faceplate, while this clip here clips the white bit of the actuator to the black barrel. Now ordinarily we should be able to just push down here and lever that clip away, but unfortunately on this keyboard, I'm not sure if this is true of all Electrons, but on this one certainly, this clip is actually glued down. So if we try and lever this that little clip away, it's actually just going to break. It doesn't really matter, it's just going to break the toothed bit off and leave us with this bit that's still stuck anyway. So we're going to have to get underneath here and actually prise this off, and it'll snap along that line there with any luck. But before we do that, we're going to pull these pins out, and these pins they've got little threads at the end, so when we pull them out we need to twist them anti-clockwise and pull a little bit and they come out, and the same on that one. There we go. And they've got a bit of dirt and corrosion on them too. Right, and then opposite their glued clip is a little divot, a little hole there. And we should, if we're lucky, sometimes this can be a real pain, but usually you can get the end of a screwdriver underneath. Yeah, like this one. That's great. So that's just slipped underneath there, and now we can twist and we can start moving around towards where that glued clip is. So here we are on the edge of that clip, and we can go to the other side of it and keep prising until we get right next to the glued clip, and then a good little tweak and it splits and the whole thing comes apart. And the white bit, we've got white plastic with a little spring in it. Don't lose any of these bits. And in the black bit we've got the key shaft, which we can push through, and then that pops out 2 bits of contact leaf. There you go. Let me just get some tweezers to show you. Right, the important one is this one, and as you can see, it's corroded. It's not bad actually. I've seen much worse than this, but yeah, it's a bit green. The actual contact points are on this side, so these bits that are bent back, they're quite green. Those bits there make contact with these pins to close the circuit when the key's pressed. But basically we need to clean all of this and put it all back together again, solder it back in, and then test it. And that's what I'm going to do now. And the easiest way to clean these contacts is with one of these little fiberglass brushes and fiberglass pens. So if you can see that, I'm just going to pick this one up and very gently I'm going to brush all the corrosion off. I'm actually doing the non-important side at the moment, but I want it to all be clean. I don't want any corrosion in there. I kind of think once there's a bit of corrosion in there, it tends to just infect everything else. Oops. I mean, this particular Electron was in quite a bad state when I started refurbishing it. It obviously had something poured over the keyboard at some point, because it took a lot of cleaning. But also I think it was probably stored somewhere a bit damp, because all of the keys pretty much had corrosion on the inside of the actuators, so I think it's more than just a few keys affected by something, by a spillage. I think the whole machine has been affected by damp. But it's nothing that can't be fixed. It's actually come out really nicely. It just takes a lot of time and effort. There we go. It's good. Quite often when you clean these, they flatten out a little bit too much. So and just sort of retension them a little bit with your fingers and thumb. Sometimes after you've done all of this, they stop working entirely, which is annoying, and sometimes you have to kind of put them back and take them apart again several times before you figure out how to get them back so they work. Actually, this little bit here is the tensioner. It actually pushes against one of these contact leaves in the barrel, and it's not strictly necessary I mean, I have got some keys where this was so badly mangled that it was basically shorting the key out, and you just, you know, if it's too far gone, you just throw it away and run the key with just the leaf contact, and it seems to work fine. It's certainly better than a broken key. It might not last as long, but yeah, that tensioner is, you know, it has a purpose obviously, but it's not entirely completely necessary. Right, once I've done that, I'm just going to use a little bit of alcohol and just clean these off. Clean these contacts off. There we go. I'm also going to clean off the pins. So you can just put them in like that and rub them together. And then if there's a bit of dirt on them that needs to come off, you can scrape it off with a pencil. It usually takes about 5 minutes to take one of these apart, clean it and reassemble it, roughly speaking. Although, as I say, some of them are really hard to take apart. Sometimes either the glue that's been put on the clip has leaked into the barrel and glued the whole barrel closed, or it's just, you know, just grime from years of not being used, not being opened. It just sticks it, and it's really hard to get even a really thin screwdriver underneath to twist it out properly. There we go. Right. Okay, that's clean enough. Now let's put it back together again. I'm going to get the black barrel. I'm going to get the key shaft bit. I don't know what all of the most technical names are for these bits. I've pretty much figured this out by trial and error, but this seems to work. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop, this is our newly cleaned leaf contact in. They're quite tricky to get right. You can see when the key goes in, there's this space. It's almost like a mouth-shaped space at the bottom, like that. And there's an equivalent bit at the base of these little leaf spring contacts. Oops. And that's what needs to go down into that hole. So it's fairly obvious how they fit together again, if you really look carefully. And then you can see, I don't know if you can see this, but when you push that up, it pushes these tops of these two things out, and it will make contact with these pins that come through from underneath. So that's how the key works. And then we have this little tensioner bit that goes in like that, and just make sure that it pushes this one as far back as possible. There we go. And then we put the little spring in the hole, and then we take the white bit, and see it's got this sort of mouth-shaped or inverse mouth-shaped plunger which goes in to that space. There we go, like that. Okay. And there's our key. And then we take our pins and we push them in a little bit, and then we screw them in, push and turn clockwise to screw them in. like that. The same with that. And once they're in, and it's quite important at this point to make sure that the black and the white bit of the case are flush and the pins are screwed in as far as they can go. We now have the moment of truth where we check continuity across the key contact. So again, I'm going to put those together, and then there we go. Now when I hit the key, perfect. Excellent. Oh, there we go. Hold it a bit tighter. There we go, job done. So all that remains is to solder that back in exactly where it came from. Stick the iron back on, and hopefully it'll still work when we switch the machine back on, and I'll have a working A key. And that's it. I won't show you how to solder it back in, it's pretty straightforward. Hope that was useful. I haven't seen anyone else do a video about actually any key repair really, let alone Acorn Electron ones, but there you go. That's what I figured out is the best way to restore an old keyboard that doesn't work. Cheers.